Well, welcome everybody to Mud Flood was Armageddon. The Mud Flood was the Armageddon. Don't let them tell you anything else unless they're willing to debate you in a fair and honest way. And that's never at the point of a gun. Who's with me on that? I'm going to get right into the sharing the screen, showing disclaimers. Look at a preview of here's the pictures. We might run into some. Oh, I think I got a better one. Nope, that is the better one. Here's the better one. Bringing the power of the sun to Earth. It's wrapped up, big magnet. You can't vibrate it, can't touch it, can't scrape it. 650 tons, including the 350 tons of machinery to carry it. Now, you can believe what you want to believe about how they built Göbekli Tepe and some of those other ones that have stones that are, they didn't have, so they say, in any way, bringing the power of the sun to Earth. Isn't that bold statement? So here's somebody climbed that mountain where I live, and I'm thinking they're crazy. You don't want to go living up there. That's too high. So they're thinking they're seeing faces in the rocks, like Daniel and other people that had visions, and they said, it has this image, it has that, and they're saying, it's amazing. They're finding it all over the world, and everyone must have learned from a common thing, or the body parts in there look like that because that's what they look like. Oh my goodness, the brush junkie false flag, that thing on Sunday, a guy started a fire to draw him in and then kill him. Turns out he didn't start the fire. Turns out it was a lot weird. Said the press conference sleight of hand, Sheriff Norris timelight mutates hourly, first briefings, rapid fire rifle volleys, maybe 1, 2, 3, even 4 shooters. By dawn, it's miraculously one kid with a 5-round shotgun. The sheriff concedes his deputies, open quote, scooped up the body, close quote, skipped ballistics mapping, took no DNA swabs, and literally bulldozed the primary van down a ravine, open quote, seeing contamination, close quote, that would flunk a rookie. Flunk a rookie? They'd flunk that guy's mommy and daddy too. Was it a false flag? He said this person wrote down, this is not a normal group to be on scene for an event. They were looking for somebody, fugitive. They're never telling us the truth. What's going on here? He didn't even set a fire. Because I'm wearing a tinfoil hat. What's going on in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, right over the border from Washington, right over the border. There was reported to be 4 gunmen. Now there are only 1. They radioed they were under heavy sniper fire, but now claim the shooter only had a shotgun. There was reported to be 11 injured, 2 dead. Now there is 3 dead and 2 injured. It was claimed the shooter started a fire to lure the firefighters in. Turned out the fire was started not by him. The fire had nothing to do with the shooting. The identity of the shooter is muddied, and the mugshots used show clear AI photo manipulation. Sheriff Deputy Norris is a Zionist, according to his Wikipedia page. I don't think he had anything to do with that. Hope I was sharing the screen. I think I am. Hola. Ola. I didn't finish showing all the pictures. That's right. Couldn't have, because I didn't show you these. These are some Sergio sent me. I think this is a little lung. You can see it's broke off there. That's be consistent. Found a rock that I think this is the myocardial band. Everything happens in a fraction of a second when you're getting hit with the glittering sword and reserved in judgment. Your organs freeze right where they are. Look a little closer, you can see, it's broke off here. You see a little line. This is where the accoutrements for the blood supply feeding the heart would go in. That's why it broke off on the bottom. It's attached at the bottom and the top and on the sides. The sides go easy, but these are big, pumping that blood through or vortexing your blood through the whole body. There's the other side of it. A little broken off here. That's where the lung only attaches in two places. It's weird. Only has a little olive oil on it. That's the other side without the broken parts. It was reserved in judgment. Look at this. So I got these stones here. Again, Sergio sent me a couple of these stones, look like eyeballs. I noticed that these have like a little crack that started. This one was a little more pronounced. So I started working on it. I couldn't find my tack hammer, so I ended up having to use a 20-ounce framing hammer. And you can tell when it got too much for these weak nails, but I'm trying to force it open here. I got it kind of started with a little vibratory tool. It's not a Dremel. It doesn't do the 360. It's a mini jackhammer, but it still wouldn't open it up. But I want to flip it open and see if I can see the optic nerve. So that's pretty cool. I thought this was interesting. Everybody knows about what's going on. I appreciate his new haircut, and everybody's got to come along at their own pace. And his pace, I think, you got to pick up the pace, JT.
Oh, look! Oh gosh, we got another one. Let's see. Maybe I'll share another one because these are pretty good. Because why not?
This isn't where I left off.
Okay, it's just the same.
And Israeli settlers are burning it down. Cars, lands, and home all attacked in a series of violent pogroms.
I've seen parts of him breaking down my videos, and when I quote scriptures, he just denies.
Anyway, he gets. Where's the part where you're getting into the abomination, desolation?
Is not what Jesus was talking about. That was about that you're going to need to look for this. Like, if you believe what I just told you, you will not be caught unawares. But what you don't see in Matthew 24 is talking about cryptids and giants. It doesn't say that. It's not talking about aliens. It's not talking about anything. It's like Jesus is telling you exactly what's going to happen before judgment comes. And he was saying people are not going to be prepared for this. They're not looking out for this. With that being said, yes, there's certainly a lot of weird stuff, and I would say
there is. What about that 490 years? You were covering that.
I don't agree that the rest of the dead are resurrected people who are like don't know their previous lives. I think that the rest of the dead are the people who are not going to be resurrected until the great white throne. Because it's
that's true.
Let's read Genesis 6. And so this is where it comes from. And it says, and when man began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any as they chose. And the Lord said to them, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterwards, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. And the Lord saw that. Oh, sorry, I should read that again. So, let's go back to.
No, don't
Genesis
read
6:4.
it again. Come on, that's all people.
Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterwards, which I mean, I believe it to mean after the flood, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men and they bore them children, or bore children to them. So the way I read that is that before and after the flood, they came into the daughters of men. Because
Giants, spirits, crowns, what? The Bible doesn't call it anything like that. And the Bible does talk about tribes that Isaac ran into, that they would kill you if you didn't say, "This is my sister." If it was your wife, they would kill you and take her. That's common.
I think it's a little bit silly that God saved 8 people out of all of humanity. There was only 8. There was probably at least 1 billion people on the earth when the flood took place. He saved 8, and one of them was genetically corrupted. I mean, it specifically points out that Noah was pure.
Where does it say one of them was genetically corrupted? Where in our Bible does it say one of those 8 was genetically corrupted? They were spiritually dead, unless God makes them alive so that the doctrine of election will continue.
In his generations, which I don't mean he was pure he was sin free. He was pure in his generations back to Adam, the first man. So I think it's kind of, I don't know, it seems kind of silly that God would have saved 8 people and one of them would have been genetically corrupted with Nephilim DNA.
So I think he's being right about being skeptical.
So I believe the angels did it again, at least one of them, which I believe was likely.
The angels, so he doesn't discount that doesn't work. He's just thinking that after the flood, spiritual angels came down and mated with women again. And he's saying, he talks about eschatology isn't a salvation issue.
They likely have more receipts to go back to Shem than, let's just say, people who came from Europe, because a lot of them probably are from the Middle East.
I think the white perspective it needs to be changing. Here's what the war is about.
Russia relied heavily on imports, mostly from China and Bolivia. But with this prize, Moscow can accelerate its plan to become self-sufficient in battery-grade lithium production. And this victory sends a clear message to the West. While sanctions tried to strangle Russia's high-tech industries, Moscow is flipping the script. It's turning the battlefield into a resource engine, one that can fuel everything from electric vehicles to advanced weapon systems. Let's talk about what Ukraine lost here. The Shevchenko.
What are they talking about?
With an explosion. Russian forces advancing through Donetsk have captured what could be Europe's largest untapped lithium deposit. That's right, lithium, the white gold of the 21st century.
The white gold of the 19th century, that's the 1800s, was the sugar beet, because they didn't have to use cane sugar. White gold is what they're looking for.
Powering everything from electric cars to the drones and missiles flying over this very battlefield.
Wow.
And now, it's in Russia's hands. By taking Shevchenko, Russia has secured a domestic source for these critical components. No more relying on volatile global supply chains. No more worrying about sanctions cutting off battery imports. As the Bulgarian military explains, this is about warfighting resilience, the ability to produce and sustain advanced systems.
Look at, there's a warrior. Modern warrior. They're coming for you. Yeah, they're coming for you.
Operations, lowering detection risk. Japan.
Don't worry. I know you love your tracking device. You know, there was a time in my life, I think before 2014, the only time I listened to black people was to prove that they're just spouting the Communist Party line. I was mistaken. I was wrong. This guy's been around for years, and everyone's waking up, and it's so hard to get across the race barrier that every tongue, every tribe, this is not a white thing at all.
The world has the French to thank for all this new undiscovered history, right after they spoiled the Indians and double-crossed them in land treaties. Ironic, don't you think?
Yeah, star for it, baby. He's just getting his groove on.
Alabama, Mobile and Biloxi in particular. Those two cities are both early French operations in this area along the Gulf Coast. They have their own rivers and watershed, and those rivers led inland to the states of Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, and Mississippi. And all of those civilizations are an empire themselves. And that area requires its own episode. So for the purposes of time, I like to keep this discussion geographically limited to this particular area around the lower Mississippi region. Because the other area deserves its own episode.
You darn right.
Really give it the amount of attention.
UB TV. This guy, man, he does it good. I know people are gonna, use theology. A lot of theology needs some work. I never heard of Red Dead Redemption.
GTA on horseback. So rather than having shootouts with the cops on the game, you have shootouts with U.S. Marshals, bounty hunters, and Pinkertons. And actually, Pinkerton is a historically accurate name for the late 1800s version of the FBI. The Pinkerton Detective Agency investigated high-level.
We never sleep.
And was even used as Secret Service.
Oh.
In the game, Lemoyne, a fictional territory, is basically the state of Louisiana. And the largest city in the game is a city called Saint Denis, which is completely modeled off of New Orleans. Many people say that Saint Denis is a historically accurate model of New Orleans during the late 1800s. But the thing that I found most interesting when I was researching was all of the history and accurate parallels. Both Lemoyne and Saint Denis are real-life figures. They're actually some of the most instrumental figures in the French colonization of Louisiana. Born in Montreal to a French merchant father, some historians have considered the Lemoyne brothers, Pierre and Jean-Baptiste, the actual founders of Louisiana, Biloxi, and New Orleans. Jean-Baptiste was involved in the Chickasaw uprisings in Memphis at Fort Assumption.
They're Jesuits that go around fomenting. It's bad. Get your groove on.
Gander at this area right here on the state line between Mississippi, Louisiana, and Arkansas. And a very peculiar thing about Arkansas, right? When I look at this map, you'll notice here, most of the map, especially when we get up past the Arkansas state line, there are no mounds identified in Arkansas. The only mounds that are identified in Arkansas are the Toltec mounds and a few other mounds, the Menard Hodges site. So there is still widespread plowing of mounds in Arkansas, and also widespread neglect and non-preservation of mounds. So you'll notice that all of these mound sites, especially once you get north of the state line, They're all only on the east of the river.
He goes through and proves over and over again that this was Egypt.
That's how they date it. That's what they say. I'm really not here at this point to argue their carbon dating. We've been debunking that. I'm not here to cape for the lack of antiquity for certain mounds or the full antiquity of other mounds. We're just going to use their numbers for now. We're just going to use whatever they say for now. You don't have to be conspiratorial to figure out that there's a massive cover-up going on. A historical cover-up.
Covering up Satan's short season.
Emerald Mound was stabilized by the National Park Service in 1955. It was declared a National Historic Landmark in 1989. They didn't give a damn about this mound until 1989.
Wow.
Before, it was just a place they would go get fill for dirt to build off-ramps. They were setting them against one another so they would all die in war. Hey, let's go kill those niggas over there. Before soon, there's nobody left to fight. And I want you to look at these rivers and these tributaries, because all they did is when they captured some people, they put them on a boat and sent them to another port. We can see that certain Indians were getting traded out of New Orleans, and they were just going to Galveston. Now we take this part of the map and we overlay the slave population. We can clearly see that the people who were enslaved on these plantations were the same people who had always been living there. And we notice that the slave population.
Couple more minutes.
What was going on before 1492? Now, if you have the calcified charlatans tell you, not much, just a group of TP-dwelling savages who made crude pottery and could barely even construct even the most elementary civilizations. And those meager civilizations are definitely not worth mentioning in history class. If it wasn't Babylon, ancient Egypt, Greece, or Rome, then history wasn't worth studying according to them. And yet the histories of Babylon, Egypt, Greece, or Rome are supposed to be connected to them via their knowledge of ancient history.
Oh.
How could the supposedly most advanced civilization in the world lose over 1,000 years of their own established history?
I advise you. I think that you should check out UB. You know, might as well. Hey, check this one out too.
Flight. Males are more agile and often take off directly from the ground. Mating itself happens in the air, right in mid-flight. Yes, nature is sometimes that romantic. But that's where the romance ends. After mating, the male no longer has any life purpose and soon dies. What does the female do? She flies away from her former home. Upon landing, it immediately bites off its own wings. What for? Because she doesn't need them anymore. The female is fertilized only once in her life. There will never be a second flight.
Wow.
Vulnerable to external threats and may face rapid extinction. However, the disappearance of one species doesn't affect the stability of the ant kingdom as a whole. These guys easily outlive the dinosaurs, so they're unlikely to be seriously endangered. And given how ant society works, it's time to think that these guys may well build some kind of alternative civilization. In terms of social structure, ants are the closest to humans on Earth. Each new discovery in myrmecology, the science of ants, proves this once and again. The anthill has a strict hierarchy and distribution of roles. The nest is managed by the queen, the founder of the colony, who lays eggs. The queen is surrounded by a retinue of 10 to 12 worker ants, who serve her by feeding and taking care of her in every possible way.
Now, I don't think the Bible wants us to go get a queen. I think what it's saying is that it's work. For civilization to work, you need those workers. And where's that part where they're cloning them? Animal husbandry, that's
The
interesting.
aphid obediently releases excess nectar at the ant's first request. Interestingly, this doesn't even come close to parasitism, since without ants' care, aphids die much
Wow.
sooner from other predators. When migrating to another area, many ant colonies take aphid herds with them.
Well, they do cloning.
Parallels with our animal farming are quite obvious here. Basin. Scientists were amazed at this turn of natural.
Now, this is a recent discovery. We've all known about ants, they have a structure. Maybe in times it's time to say, go to the ants, and if they did it, we could do it in the short season.
Essential. When colonies of Mycocephorus smithii were discovered in the Amazon basin, scientists were amazed at this turn of natural evolution. All individuals in the discovered colony were females, and all of them were exact copies of the same queen, and naturally, each other. The data was published in a report by the research team in Proceedings of the Royal Society. The researchers admitted that they stumbled upon this amazing fact by accident. They noticed that the males were missing while studying other aspects of this species' life. Not being able to identify males in the nest based on external signs, scientists conducted a DNA analysis of the individuals they collected. They found that all of them were indeed females, and that they were all queen clones. After that, scientists found that the most important reproductive organ in a queen, the copulatory bag, has completely lost its function. However, several years later,
On the forest floors of North and South America, a remarkable army marches down a 10-lane wide superhighway with precious cargo in tow. You've probably heard of leafcutter ants or have even seen them yourself. Lines of ants marching with pieces of leaves in their mandibles. But if you look closely, there's something else weird going on here. On many of the leaves, smaller ants are hitching a ride. At first glance, this looks like the ants could just be confused, getting tangled up in the commotion, and getting accidentally carried away. But this is no accident. These ants are performing a very important job. They're acting as sentinels, protectors of the leaf-carrying ants, defending them against a devastating enemy, phorid flies. These parasitic flies are trying to inject their eggs into the ant's body, where the larva will eat the ant from the inside out. So these smaller ants, known as minims, will ride the leaves and ward off any
Wow.
attack. This makes the mandibles much more robust and specialized for cutting. This sharp and durable anatomy allows leafcutter ants to cut thousands of leaf fragments in its lifetime. But there's one more thing that helps a leafcutter ant cut leaves that is kind of unexpected, and that is sound. If you listen closely to leafcutter ants cutting leaves, you hear some clicks. That is the sound of the mandibles cutting the leaf, and you'll hear a background sort of humming or chirping. This is a high-frequency vibration called a stridulation, and it's produced by the stridulatory organ.
Isn't that
This organ
crazy?
is located on the gaster. This is important because carbon dioxide can build up and is toxic to the ants. But decaying organic material in the refuse chambers raises the temperature of the nest, causing the warm, carbon dioxide-laden air to rise and flow out of the openings. In turn, cool, fresh air is pulled back into the nest through other openings. This creates a sort of air conditioning system. What social ants can achieve far surpasses almost anything else in the animal kingdom. The superorganism. The evolution of intelligence in different species is probably my favorite topic within all of biology. How animals so far apart on the evolutionary tree became hyper intelligent in different ways.
So it's hard to believe, but hey, guess who I met today? This guy. You got his book here. Man, come on. Well, I got his book. Crazy that it showed it at the very end there. And it's about Alamosa. So, I'm trying to meet these people, and their grandparents got stuck here and they're trying to make the best of it.
That once belonged to his father is Bill Hersink's way of keeping the family recital alive and ticking.
Yeah, this is the gold watch my dad had. He had a silver one that he wore every day, and this one was reserved for just Sundays.
Hersink is writing his family story, the Dutch story, from his perch in order to preserve an important chapter of American history.
It's the Hoff Ranch in the San Luis Valley. How they related to the rest of the environment, and that seems to me to be an important picture of the whole valley story, and as well as just the story of the Dutch there and my ancestry. If for no other reason, they're just fascinating, amazing kind of stories that I just don't think we want to forget. And I'm the last of my generation, and I want to make sure that there's something that follows and in a good readable form.
He told me that, it does talk about how they were lied to, to get them over here. And they just, like Christians today, just, oh, that'll be great. You got to be careful. Anyway.
It's a great part of the Dutch heritage and my family, but I also can see it as an important part of the whole settlement of the San Luis Valley.
From a disappointing disaster more than a century ago to the enduring story of those who stayed, this chapter of history only adds.
So what is amazing to me is the fact that if you talk to these people like I'm getting to know them, they act like they've just been here forever and ever. It's only been a little over 100 years, if that, for some of them. Some families did get tricked coming here in the 1888. And then they facilitated tricking others. But they knew they were going to make it work. It's all part of God's plan. It's where the Lord has me. Wherever he has you, remember, you can be called, chosen. You need to be faithful. It's a flat earth nation. The golden age is past. The mud flood was Armageddon. Me and my friends are never going to tell you anything else. Amen. Hallelujah. Aho. Aloha. Arrivederci. Ciao. Sayonara. Auf Wiedersehen. Nakamen. It's how I like to say goodbye.